Very official.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait a couple minutes while everybody comes in. Thanks for coming. Hi. Welcome, welcome. I see a couple of people popping in. Welcome. Hi. Happy to have you here. We're just getting started. We're going to wait a couple minutes until everyone can join. Sometimes it takes a little bit to get logged in. Liz, you look like you are in some tropical paradise. Please regale us with tales of where you are in the world right now, because it's not on the East Coast, I can tell.
Right. I am very comfortable right now. I am currently on my sailboat in the Bahamas on an island called Long Island. And usually it's quite beautiful and sunny. Today is gray and windy, so that's not so fun, but it is what it is. It's still paradise.
It's still paradise.
Yeah.
And it's not cold. Ice cold England.
For us, 70 is like, oh my gosh, a long sleeve t-shirt, please, you know? So, but there's no snow, thank goodness.
No snow. And what is that picture behind you?
This is a watercolor painting a friend of mine did of my boat in French Polynesia.
Oh,
yeah, it's really pretty. Let's see.
See it from here. It's really pretty.
We'll get the glare. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's very nice.
Well, I think we'll get started. I want to say an official thank you to everyone who's joining us tonight. This is our first kickoff event. I'm Casey Robinson. I'm the events manager at the Silver Unicorn Bookstore in Acton, Massachusetts. And this is our first event of 2022. And I'm very excited to have all of you, our audience here tonight, as well as the world traveler and author Liz Alden, who is joining us from her boat in the Bahamas. And I'm going to pretend I'm sitting next to her in the Bahamas. Liz has written a series of books called the Love and Wanderlust series. And this is the first book, The Hitchhiker in Panama. And we'll be talking all about her series and her travels that have inspired the books, as well as the fact that she has been on a sailboat with her husband sailing around the globe since 2014. Is that right? Did I get that right?
That is correct. Yeah.
Amazing. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And just a quick logistics to our audience. If you would like to put some questions in the chat or the Q&A, feel free. We always love a lively chat. And we'll have plenty of time for questions. So feel free to do that. And Liz's books are all available at our store in Acton, the Silver Unicorn Bookstore, or silverunicornbooks.com for anyone who is not local. So just giving you this visual.
And I have the other two right here. So yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so we have established that you are in the Bahamas.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how you came to make the decision to get on a boat and circumnavigate the globe, first and foremost. And then after that, I want to hear about how you decided to start writing romance novels.
Absolutely. Well, the first is kind of a sad answer in that my dad was the sailor in my life, and he actually passed away when he was 50 years old. And I was 25, and it was really sudden. So it was kind of that moment where you realize life is short. It hits really close to home. So inspired by my dad, who lived on a sailboat for a little while and went cruising, my husband and I started to dream about doing our own cruise. And over the years, we did things like learn how to sail and got our captain's licenses and saved up money. And then in 2014, we bought our boat and took off cruising. We knew that we wanted to set a goal and kind of have like a little bit of a deadline. So we said we wanted to sail around the world, and we gave ourselves, I think we originally gave ourselves 5 years, and it ended up being more like 7 years of living on the boat by the time we got to the end, quote, the end, which would be crossing our wake in Antigua in the Caribbean. So yeah, it's a long process for us. It was a long process for us, but it's been a really fascinating lifestyle. And my dad would be super proud of me, and I wish he was here all the time. And then writing romance. I started reading romance with 50 Shades of Grey, I'll say, but it sparked something in me because I thought, well, this is really interesting, fun read, but I think that I could find something that I would like a little bit more. And so then I really dug into romance and explored everything the genre has to offer. And I've been just like swamped ever since. My TBR is way too long and I read probably too many books, but I love it. And I think it's a really fun genre. In 2018, I literally, figuratively, picked up my pen and started writing. And I realized about halfway through my draft that I didn't know what I was doing. So I joined a bunch of groups on Facebook and read a bunch of books and learned more about plot structure and character building. And then COVID hit. And I was like, this is perfect. I've always wanted to write a novel. I joined NaNoWriMo, and here we are today.
Very inspiring. You make it sound easy.
I mean, it's been a lot of work, but it's what I have time for, thankfully. So, yeah.
Was The Hitchhiker and Panama your first book that you wrote?
It's the first book that I published. The original book was the book that I attempted to write in 2018. I read it recently and it's still pretty good. I mean, it's like missing half of it, but it's set in New York City. And when I got stuck, I thought the answer to that was write what I know, sage old advice. And that's how I ended up writing these books based on my own travels.
So in this book, which I just finished reading this, so this is what I'm going to start with. The main character is Lila, and she's a fairly sheltered woman.
Yeah.
And she shows up to have the adventure of a lifetime. And did that feel to you? Is that what it felt like to you? So based on what you know, writing what you know, when you started sailing, was that your experience?
It was my experience, and it continues to be my experience. There's just so much to learn about boats, and there's always another thing to learn and project to tackle. So you're constantly learning new things and coming into situations that you've never been in before. So Lila is kind of a consistent aspect of the cruising life, is there's always something new.
And one of the things I loved about this book too is the sense of fun and playfulness. And there are several times in the book where I laughed out loud. And the community that she meets in Shelter Bay is fun and tight knit. And I'm very curious if that is what it's like when you are out and adventuring on your own. Is that your experience too? Like, is that what it's like in real life?
Absolutely. Shelter Bay is a real place. We were there for, I think, 2 weeks on our sailboat. And there's actually so much more. Maybe I should release them as like deleted scenes sometimes, but Lila going to play dominoes and like learn all these interesting things about all these people that are cruisers, and going on jungle walks and movie night. And like in the book, you've got the jungle walk and you've also got the mic night. Like all of these things really existed at Shelter Bay in Panama. And a lot of places are like that. We are about a day's sail away from Georgetown, Bahamas, which is a major hub for cruisers in the Bahamas. And right now, there are like 300 boats, which is crazy. But there's also 3 times a week, there's yoga on the beach, and 3 times a week, there's water aerobics, and there's hiking, and there's beach volleyball every day at 2 o'clock if you want. So there's all these things and activities and ways to connect with people that really makes it feel like a great community.
Liz, you're living the dream.
I know. I'm so lucky.
Keep talking about dominoes. It's making me feel better about the winter. So your protagonist sets sail across the ocean with someone she does not know very well.
Yeah.
Does this happen in real life? Who are these people who take these sorts of adventures?
I know, it's crazy, but it does happen in real life. It happens with people who develop a romantic relationship, which is amazing. We have friends who've met in, one port or another, and he said, well, I'm leaving and sailing off this way, and why don't you come with me? Or why don't you fly and meet me in a few weeks or something? So it's amazing that people make that connection, make it so quickly and make it so strongly. On the non-romantic front, there are dozens of places all over the world where people are looking to connect with strangers to help them in their cruising journey. Panama is one, as you saw in the book. People go to the Panama Canal. They need extra people on their boat, so they take on hitchhikers or other boaters to help them. Another example would be the Canary Islands. Right before people are jumping across the Atlantic Ocean, we were there and people are walking the docks and posting flyers, and they're saying, well, I have experience doing this and experience doing that, and I can cook and I can clean, and I'm not a stranger to this lifestyle. Will you take me on board to cross the Atlantic? Which is crazy, but that's an excellent way for people to develop the skills for sailing that they need, which is really interesting. Just like a huge, interesting societal experiment, right?
Yeah. It's like a life adventure co-op.
Yes, exactly.
Hands-on learning.
Yep. Really diving right in.
Yeah, literally. Did you cross the Panama Canal?
Yes, twice. Once on someone else's boat and then once on my own boat.
What was it like?
It was pretty awe-inspiring. You are on these little sailboats, which you don't think they're little, but when you're tucked into the lock of the Panama Canal and a huge cruise ship is coming up behind you, and it you can literally look up and see their pointy bow. It's amazing. And then all of the engineering that goes into it. So you're tied to the dock or tied to the side of the canal. And when they open the gates or pump water, you're watching an engineering marvel happen. So it's really amazing.
I'm just trying to imagine.
Now, one thing for my books is that I usually have a little behind the scenes to subscribers in my newsletter. So every newsletter that goes out in my emails, there's a link at the bottom for all the bonus material. And there's links for the Hitchhiker in Panama and the Sailor in Polynesia, where you can see photos from my own trips and little side stories about things that happen to the characters, which is a lot of fun for me to put together. So
just put the link in the chat for anybody who wants to subscribe. Please do. Okay, so I want to know what you are currently working on.
I have a novel coming out next month, which is called The Player in New Zealand. It is a ex-rugby player romance with two grumps, and it takes place in a workplace environment in a bar. It's in New Zealand, obviously. And we've also got only one bed / only one tent and a fake relationship, a fake wedding date. So it's a lot of fun. It's the sexiest, funniest book that I've written, and I'm just really excited to share it. Claire and Tane are just a hoot together. Someone was asking me about my tent scene, and they had also written a tent scene today. This is a conversation I had today. They said, well, I have a tent scene too, but I weighed putting it in or not, but it's a really pivotal moment. And I said, oh, well, my tent moment is just my two characters being total goofballs together. It was a blast to write, and it was really funny. So I really enjoy this book a lot, and I'm excited for it to come out.
So obviously you are quite inspired by your own travels, but where do you get your plots and your character development's very sophisticated, and how does that all come together? Like, what inspires you to have sort of the bigger vision for what each book will be?
Well, it's definitely a lot of, it's funny. The characters in the first two books, the Hitchhiker in Panama and the Sailor in Polynesia, I paired them up from the beginning. And I knew that I wanted to have this dichotomy of a fish out of water with Lila and an experienced sailor with Avon. And then the second book, The Sailor in Polynesia, is two experienced sailors. So you get two kind of different perspectives of the sailing life. And then the third book, it was going to be the player in New Zealand. But when Marcella left in the first and second book, she was very adamant that she needed to get her own story. So I ended up sitting down and writing Marcella's story. And that was when I started writing enemies to lovers, which is one of my favorite tropes. And that's just a blast to write, like to figure out, well, what is this scene that caused them to be enemies first? And how does it build into this sexual tension? And how is it going to explode? So yeah, they're just all from, who knows how I cook up stuff. I don't know if that's a good answer, but man, it's a lot of fun.
Brain is a mysterious place, especially
it is exactly.
So your dedication in this first book cracked me up.
Oh, good.
To read it out loud, and then I'm going to ask a question about it. So Liz dedicates The Hitchhiker in Panama to her husband. And then she also dedicates it to everyone who said I should write a book. This is not what you had in mind. Thank you for encouraging me anyway. So my question to you, Liz, is did you always want to be a writer? And how did you decide to start writing romance initially?
I think that every child who grows up being a big reader wants to be a writer at some point in their life. But reality, society kind of knocks you down about it and saying like, well, it's really tough. And I remember almost failing out of advanced placement English in 9th grade because it was just like, it was too much and too daunting and too hard. And if something like that happens and you think, well, I'm more of a science and technology person, obviously, so I can't be a writer. But the decision to write romance is, I love the romance genre so much. I think it's such an important part of our society, and I love reading it. It's a fabulous passion of mine.
How many books did you read this year? How many total?
Last year, I read 207 books.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And like probably, at least 180 of them were romance books or something. It's just such a huge genre and so prolific, and there's so much variety. And one of the things I love about it is people can come to the genre and be like, well, I've never read romance. What do you think I should read? And I can say to them, well, what do you normally read? And they might be like, well, I like thrillers. And I'm like, well, read a thriller romance or a suspense romance. Or if you like reading sci-fi, read a sci-fi romance. Like there's such an easy stepping stone into the genre, no matter where you come from, which I think is fascinating.
And you've chosen to self-publish these books.
Yes.
Tell us why that is. And then it would be really interesting, I think, to give people a sense of like what that process looks like and how you go about it, especially for anyone on this call, on this event who is interested perhaps in self-publishing themselves.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people don't know a whole lot about the process. And it's same with sailing, actually. Like people ask me kind of questions that make me sit back and think, oh yeah, like nobody knows this stuff, really. So for a rough starter guide to publishing, Liz Alden's rough starter guide to publishing, we have self-publishing on one side and traditional publishing on the other. And self-publishing is great because it can be such a wide range. It can be, well, I finished my story, I ran it through a word spell check, and I'm going to publish it. Or it can be, I've taken years to write this thing, and I've worked with a lot of complex editors and really polished this thing, and I'm going to put it out. And it doesn't necessarily mean that one is better than the other, because there are some fantastic novels I've read that I know went through a very small process to be self-published, but they're amazing. People have that innate talent in them. So for self-publishing, the way I did it, I wrote my book, joined author groups, and found people to read my novels and give me feedback on them, which is incredibly invaluable. And it's a service that most authors do for each other for free. And then I hired a team of editors who have worked for the big traditional publishing houses. Developmental editor, a copy editor, and a proofreader. And then I also hired a very professional cover designer.
Yeah, your cover's fabulous.
Thank you. I love my covers. My cover designer is Elizabeth Stokes, and she's amazing. And she does a lot of other romance covers that you might have seen, like Boyfriend Material was one that she did. So yeah, she's fantastic. I chose to go self-publishing because the traditional publishing process is very long. Typically, people write a manuscript and then they have to write a query letter, and then they pitch their query letter to agents, and an agent might usually never answer. And then sometimes they'll get, well, send me your first chapter, or sometimes they'll get, well, send me your whole manuscript. And then they might pass on it or not. But then if the agent agrees to work with the author, then you have to in turn sell it to the publishing house. So we're talking a years long process, especially to sell your first book. I recently read a post about someone written by someone who'd done both. And it's like, well, I have made 6 figures from my self-published books, and I've made 6 figures advances in my traditional publishing books. Like, there's different ways to do it. I do think that a big pro of self-publishing is that it's able to respond to changes in genre better, and changes in like niches and tastes in readers. Like right now, you'll see a lot of alien romance being really exciting and monster romance being really exciting. And that's self-published authors who are leading the front on that. And you also see a lot of transition lately from self-published to traditionally published. I just read Lucy Score's upcoming book. She's one of the biggest self-published authors in the rom-com genre, and her upcoming book is Maggie Moves On, which is her first traditional publishing book. So that's really interesting. Another big difference is that agents and publishing houses are gatekeepers to the publishing industry, and self-published authors have a lot more latitude for authors of color, for queer authors, and that is strengthening the self-publishing industry as we move forward, which is really exciting.
That is exciting.
Yeah.
And you're right about the difference in time frame and the ability that affords self-published authors to pay attention to the trends and to influence them, because the timing between when you're finished
Yes.
and when the book comes out is so much shorter than a traditionally published route.
Yes. So Panama took me about a year from when I started writing to when I published it, which is actually fairly long for self-published authors. I'm in a few groups where people are rapid releasing books, and they're, writing full time, and they are cranking out novels like you wouldn't believe. And there's a lot of very successful self-published authors who are doing that. Like Lauren Blakely is one. I think she said in an email that she wrote like 14 books last year, published 14 books last year. And it's wild. But wow. I also know that she holds up in her cave and, is really, really intense with her writing.
How many books do you write in a year?
When I publish The Player in New Zealand next month, that will be 4 novels and a novella.
That's
in 1 year.
A lot.
It is. Yeah. So
is your process now sort of down? Like, do you have a critique group of people who review, or do you go through to different people depending on the groups that you belong to? I know you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, I have a few groups that I can post up asking for critique partners if I need to, but I also have a few regulars who tell me that they love my books and they give me great feedback, and so they want to keep reading for me, which is really nice. And actually, when I was writing the acknowledgements for the player in New Zealand, I realized that the 4 critique partners I had, which is a lot, they're all published as well. So they're, about the same level as me, and they're not big name authors or anything, but they're self-published authors who have a book or 2 or 3 out, and they're a good supportive community, which is really nice.
So important.
Yeah.
Everyone has an idea of, writers being alone and sort of the glow screen of their laptop or their excessive scratching in their notebooks, but really there are just so many people who play a key role in getting a book from your brain to the page, to the shelves.
Yeah. One of the things that I do to write my first draft is I do sprinting, and this is some advice that you can get in a lot of articles or books on how to speed up your writing process. So sprinting is where you kind of prepare yourself, and then you sit down, you set a timer for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever, and you just write. So that sounds like it could be a solitary thing, but I'm in a lot of Discord servers where we all sprint together. So we're sprinting for 20, 25 minutes, and then we take a 5-minute break and chat about it, and then we get back to sprinting. So it's more social than I think it used to be. Reddit and Discord servers are really making the writing community much stronger, which is lovely.
Do you have anything you want to share or read? Could we get a little peek into your world?
Okay. I am going to read a short excerpt from The Second Chance in the Mediterranean. This is Marcella's story. And if you subscribe to my newsletter or go to any of the online retailers, the prequel for this novel is a short story, and it is their first chance romance. So it's steamy as well. It's the first time that Seb and Marcella hook up, hence The Second Chance in the Mediterranean. So in this very short scene, the beginning of chapter 2, Marcella has just boarded the super yacht where she is going to be the chef. And she has just encountered Seb, and she did not know that he was working here. So awkward. Seb closed the door behind him and put his arms out for a hug. My mind panicked, and instead of hugging Seb, which was so tempting, knowing how delicious he smelled even when working hard, I stuck my hand out for a handshake. Nice to meet you. My smile was too big, too fake. Seb's arms fell to his side and his brow wrinkled in confusion. I think you know each other from before. Seb used to work on Odyssey with you. Dom sounded confused, his voice a little bit higher. Right, I blushed, shaking Seb's hand. I meant, good to see you, Seb. Obviously, I remember you. I laughed nervously and snatched my hand back. Seb ran a hand through his hair, and I watched too closely while his fingers slid through his dark mane and tugged at the ends. It was so shockingly familiar to see him do that. Right, I said, taking a tiny step away from Seb. The other deckhands had disappeared, and my bags were neatly stacked just inside the door of my cabin. I'm going to unpack. See you later, Dom. Dom passed a look back at Seb, but stepped away. See you at 4. Taking deep breaths, I stood in the center of my room and tried to calm myself down. Seeing Seb here was shocking, and I couldn't imagine working with him every day. I flushed, thinking about my first day on the job at Odyssey and how I'd accidentally walked in on him stepping out of the shower. My first few months of knowing him had been awkward simply because I had the image of him naked burned into my mind. Everywhere I went on the yacht, Seb had been there with his infectious smile, scrubbing the decks, always seeming to be wet and shirtless. It wasn't until months later that I admitted my attraction and we'd fallen into bed together. But this was so much worse. Now I would see Seb and I would be thinking about the time we had sex, also known as the night before I got fired. Dun, dun,
Dun, dun, dun. Wait, hold that up. Everyone's going to want to write that
Yes.
down.
The Second Chance in the Mediterranean. So it is a romance between a yacht chef and a deckhand. Second chance, enemies to lovers. Seb is a fantastic, all my heroes are like cinnamon roll heroes. They're just so super sweet and I love them to death. So he's a good one. And they travel around the Mediterranean in this book and do like fancy events for the yacht owners and have fun crew days. And yeah, it's a blast.
So you are between your own life, being on a boat with your husband, and your writing life about all of these wonderful people that you've invented who are traveling around the world together.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, we've all been stuck in the pandemic together, isolated and yet together. So I wonder if you have any words of wisdom or advice for people who want to get away and travel, either with their partners or, I guess, give us some life advice, Liz. You're living a glorious life down there in the Bahamas.
Well, thank you. I am a little bit of a travel addict. I have a Pinterest board and it is just crazy with all of these trips that I want to take. And I know that not only have most of us been confined to our hometown, our home for far too long, but we've also been confined with our loved ones, which has been difficult. And I think that it's interesting. There was a joke going around the cruising community when COVID first came out that we were socially distancing before it was cool, because we've traveled the world with just our household, which is a little crazy. I think as far as travel goes, to me, it's always been, and as you can see in the Hitchhiker in Panama, there's a sense of newness and an excitement in kind of planning what you can do. And Lila's got this analytical engineering mind, and so she's got spreadsheets and she's like trying to figure out how to make everything work, and this is like her first big trip away. So it's really interesting to see that in people, myself included sometimes, and then how travel can just absolutely throw a wrench into it. And with traveling as often as I have, you really learn to recognize those opportunities and try to grow with them. And things don't always go as planned. And sometimes travel life hasn't been, Instagram worthy, but we still enjoy it and we still do it. I know there have been a lot of times in our life where we got tired of it. Like an example that comes to mind is there was a night in Sri Lanka. We had hired a driver to take us around the country, and he was supposed to help us pick out a hotel, and like the first hotel like was way too expensive. The second hotel was like not clean. And so it's like you're exhausted and you're trying to find a place to sleep and you're tired and you're hungry and you're going through all these things. And it's really a fascinating way to learn more about yourself and your partner. And I think people who are traveling together have a bit of a different awareness of themselves and of the people around them, which is really invaluable. So not only do you get to go most of the time on fun, amazing trips, but you get to know yourself better and you get to know the people you're with better. And that's an amazing gift.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite place that you've traveled? I mean, that must be a very difficult question.
It is a difficult question. The Sailor in Polynesia is set in French Polynesia. And it's actually, it starts in the Tuamotu Islands, which are these beautiful sandy, beachy atolls, like palm trees and crystal clear water, and it's amazing. Oh, and that's the painting too. Did I show the painting? This is our boat in French Polynesia. in Kauai, which is actually where the book starts. So the sailor in Polynesia starts in Kauai. And one of the fantastic things about French Polynesia is that you have these multiple island groups and each one has its own different personality. The Marquesas, which is where Lila and the crew of Eek come in the Hitchhiker in Panama. It's this like Jurassic volcanic islands, and it's really lush and jungle and just fascinating. And then the Tuamotus, which are these sandy atolls, and then the societies like Tahiti and Bora Bora, they're a combination. So you have a rocky volcanic island, and then you have a reef around it, or motus, which is what the little islands around it are called. And then you have the cultures. It's like French and it's Marquesan and it's Tahitian and it's all of these fantastic things. So, and the underwater life. You can't forget the underwater life. If you want to go diving, French Polynesia is amazing. So that's an easy one. The other one is New Zealand, which is part of the reason why I'm writing, or I wrote The Player in New Zealand, was because I loved the country so much. It's beautiful. It's got this fantastic history and culture and really amazing strength in the Maori people. And that's something that really contrasts with what we know in America. Like growing up, I vaguely knew about the Native American tribes that were in the Houston area, but the Maori culture is such a huge part of New England, and we were able to participate in cultural activities for the Maori people and with Maori people. And it's really interesting. The hero, Tane, is Maori, and that was challenging to write, but also a lot of fun and a very important piece of New Zealand. So I'm really excited to bring that forward.
Do you feel like the writing invites is not the right word, but insists that you get to know a particular destination in a sort of a deeper way than if you would have just visited? So I'm thinking about, what you must have to do in terms of research, or while you're there, is the story sort of forming, and does that whole process of being an author and a writer and like turning something into an actual book, does that affect or impact how you experience that place?
Well, I started writing Panama in 2020, but my visit was actually in 2016. So before this novel was even a twinkle in my eye, I was experiencing all these things. Fortunate for me, at the time of my visit, I was writing a blog and making videos of our trips. So that's something I'm so thankful that I did, because now I go back and read the blog posts. Like when I'm writing these books and I'm doing research, I go back and read my old blog posts and I think, I don't remember doing that. Like, that's amazing that I did that. It's totally slipped my mind. And if I didn't have the photos and the stories that I've written, how much of my trip would I have lost? Which is really tragic to think about. And one piece of advice I like to give people who are just starting out on an adventure like this is to pick up a camera and learn how to use it, because through we left in 2014, and until like 2017 was when I first picked up a DSLR camera. And so all the photos, 3 years of photos, are taken with my dinky iPhone 4 or whatever it was, and they don't do anything justice, which is sad. But it gave me a skill to learn along the way, and it helps keep my memories fresh, which is fun. Nowadays, most people have fancy phones with better cameras than I did, but you still have to know how to use it, and you still have to have an eye for detail. So yeah, it's really nice to have these kind of things to keep my memory fresh.
Smart. It's like having a journal, right? Your blog.
Exactly. Yeah. And then it's a little harder with photos because, you can take 100 or 1,000 photos or whatever. And if you don't curate them.
Mhm.
It's not as easy to spark your memory like that. But if you do a good job of curating, I have like a folder for each kind of country that's like best photos or something. So I can go in and I can say, oh yeah, okay, here's like 20 photos from this one place that I visited. So that helps a lot.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Um,
Years of experience now, Casey.
You're very wise, Liz. Very wise. So speaking of wisdom, if we have anyone who's on with us tonight who's an aspiring writer, what good advice do you have for them?
I have two really good quotes. One I know is Nora Roberts, and she says that you can't edit a blank page. And then the second, I saw this recently, there's no such thing as a bad first draft. Its only job is to exist. So as long as your first draft exists, you're good. I think that there's a lot of people who want to be writers, but they don't really have a strategy for doing it. And so those two quotes tell you an important strategy is to just write. So when I'm doing my sprinting and when I'm trying to get my 50, 60,000 words down to write a full novel, it's raining now on us. So if you can hear the background noise, sorry. Raining in paradise. So when I'm working to get my 50 or 60,000 words for my first draft, I am not letting myself getting bogged down with editing. I'm not letting myself getting bogged down with research. I've hopefully, if I've done the proper job, which I'm not always very good about, I have planned out my structure and my characters and my scenes. And so I am just writing, getting the words down, getting the story down, and then I can worry about the rest of it later. Because literally, well, I'll say I really don't like the first round of developmental edits, but other than that, the hardest part is just writing the whole thing down. So if you can get that done, it's like mostly downhill from there and you'll be okay.
So you're more of a plotter than say a pantser, which is what we call, the folks who have a vision, a starting point, and then they just go and see where the story takes them.
I'm trying to be Casey. I'm trying. It's really hard. I think The Player in New Zealand is my fourth novel. So I'm developing a system that works for me. And with the current project that I'm writing, I have done a little bit better job of not necessarily writing out scenes or an outline, but I've written, okay, this is the trope that I'm going to use. This is the character archetype. This is going to be their meet cute. And this is what's going to be the conflict. I usually write like a synopsis and a hook for the book. So you kind of have I kind of have all that in mind while I'm writing, but usually I haven't planned out the ending very well. And so I get to the end and I kind of have to like figure it out as I go along. But a lot of times the characters will tell you themselves what the ending is going to be. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I'm a plantser is what's happening.
I mean, you got to have a little fun, right? A little bit of surprise, a little bit of a mystery for yourself as an author.
Yes.
What strikes me about what you just said, Liz, is how well you know the genre you're writing in.
Mm-hmm.
So you know the pieces that have to be there, that your readers will be expecting. You know the moments they need, and then that probably, I would imagine, frees you to kind of play around a little bit and have a little bit of fun in new and interesting ways, right? With your storylines and your characters.
Yeah, it's definitely been a learning experience. So when I started, or when I had the first draft of The Hitchhiker in Panama, now everybody who's listening, my books are very light, very fluffy, they're funny. The first draft was even less angsty than it is now. Like I really cannot write angst to save my life. I cannot write an alcohol to save my life. That is not who my characters are. So, my first critique partner said like, you need to put a little bit more something here in the back. so then you go in and I read Romancing the Beast, and that's like the Bible for how to structure a romance novel, which I highly recommend everybody read. Now, in like some of the books, the book that I'm working on now, you kind of I may have already said this actually. You kind of like keep working, you write, and I didn't necessarily know what the ending was going to be, but as you're developing your characters along, you realize what the ending is going to be, and you get a little bit more excited about it the more you write. And that's it's just interesting how the mind works, you know.
Do you ever get writer's block? Or I should ask, do you even believe in writer's block? Because some writers do not believe in writer's block. So I can ask you that first. And then, have you suffered from an affliction resembling writer's block?
I believe writer's block is a real thing. The first draft of The Player in New Zealand took me a lot longer than my previous books had. And I think part of that was because when I started writing New Zealand, I had already released all 3 of my current books that are out. And suddenly I was like overwhelmed with all the marketing stuff, and it really zapped my energy and my desire and motivation to write anything. And that was really hard. I do know, well, one of the things that I did was I like cut out Facebook ads from my strategy and just said, look, this is too stressful for me. I can't handle it. And then once you take that away, that was a lot easier. I do occasionally get stuck in scenes, which happens. And because I'm writing that first draft kind of stream of consciousness and trying to write as much as I can, I don't let myself get bogged down. So a strategy that I learned is to leave notes for myself for the future. So sometimes I won't know how to finish a scene. So I open a bracket, say, figure out how to end this scene, close bracket, or open bracket, say something witty here, end bracket, or open bracket, they need to have a conversation about something, close bracket. So then after I've written my 50,000 words for my first draft or whatever, then I can go search my document for brackets and then do, like, maybe I need to pick a name for a character, or maybe I need to research a location, or I need to finish an argument or finish a sex scene or whatever it is, and try to figure out, now that I know where it's going to go from there, going back helps me figure that out better. So.
That makes a lot of sense, because then you're not tossing yourself out of the story flow.
Yes,
either,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, it's a problem for future you. So.
And a vote of confidence in future you.
Oh, exactly. That's a great way to put it. Now, from now on, I'm going to say open bracket. Confident future Liz can do this, end bracket. There we go.
You got this at the end of your bracket.
Little motivational notes throughout my first draft. That's great. You can do this, Liz. Casey says you can do this.
That's right. There need some pom-poms. Just picture me with pom-poms.
Yep.
Liz, you've also written nonfiction.
Yes, I write sailing articles for my own blog and for magazines as well, and other websites too.
And is that very different, the process? I imagine that the process of developing those articles and those pieces must be different than your wild, creative, fictional brain.
Yes, they're very different. A lot of what I write is more of an informational article. Mm-hmm. So for example, I wrote a article for a popular galley website, boat galley website, and said, here's 8 things to do with dried chickpeas, basically. So, and here's why you should have them on your boat, because they're lighter and they're more diverse, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's drawing from a cumulative experience and distilling it down. I recently sold an article to Cruising World magazine, and it's about shell collecting or shell beachcombing, basically. So it's combining all of my experiences together and focusing it on one topic, which I guess is actually not, now that I'm thinking about it, Casey, very interesting question. The Hitchhiker in Panama had a culmination of a lot of my experiences. For example, we had going through the Panama Canal, we had the incident with the spinnaker, which is kind of a big moment, dangerous, scary moment for the crew. That was a completely different passage for me. So yeah, I have pulled and pieced stories together. So that's an interesting way of looking at that. All right. Yeah. But the nonfiction is, it's interesting because there's so many different ways to write it. And the article I might write for Cruising World magazine is a like conversational, whereas like a website might have something that's more informative and bullet pointed. Mm-hmm. So it's stretching quite a few writing muscles, but I really enjoy it. And I get paid to do it. So that's great.
It's a win-win.
Yes, exactly.
What are you reading right now? I love to ask authors what they're reading, because sometimes it's very surprising, the kinds of things that they have on their bedside table.
Yes. Okay. I don't think I have my Kindle anywhere near, but one I'm reading, I actually have several in the works right now, which my lovely assistant has given me my Kindle.
Thank you, assistant.
Everybody says thank you. Okay, so I am reading, as I said, I have several reads going on right now, which is really unusual for me, but I'm very active in the Reddit book community, so especially our romance books. So I have got, I have an ARC read that I'm doing, an advanced reader copy of a fellow author from one of my groups, which is called Sticky Treats by Monica Myers. And it is a romantic comedy about a erotic baker. So it's really a quirky sense of humor. I'm enjoying it. I am also reading, this is with the Our Fantasy HEA book club. So the subreddit about fantasy worlds and books and all that kind of stuff. They have a regular book club for fantasy romance. And this is the first time I'm joined, but I'm reading A Marvelous Light by Freya Marsky, I think is the name. Mm-hmm. And I'm about halfway through that. It is a low fantasy gay romance, and it's really got me on the edge of my seat. I am like super interested in it. And here's the thing about when I read for a book club or for a buddy read, I have to, like, I've read 50% for the discussion on the halfway point, and now I'm going to have to wait like 2 weeks to read the second 50%. So it's like fresh in my mind, because otherwise I will have read, 10 books in between then and now. I'm also reading A Girl Like Her by Talia Hibbert, which is the first book in her Ravenswood series. And that is for a upcoming book club with the Our Romance books. And then I've got a couple of library books that and more ARCs that I've got to get going on because they're due soon. So always a busy time. It's a very busy reading time right now. I think I have made too many commitments, but it is what it is.
It's thrilling nonetheless.
Yes. So that's quite a lot going on right now. And A Marvelous Light, I do enjoy reading fantasy romance and sci-fi romance, although I don't read them often, but A Marvelous Light has really piqued my interest right now. So yeah.
Thanks for the rec.
Yeah.
Everybody write that down. Liz, it's so inspiring to talk to you. I think it's very obvious that you are a worldly and curious person. Like, you're very present in the things that you're doing and the way you're interacting with your community, your book communities, and with all of the places, the people you meet and the places you go. And you have a certain joie de vivre about you.
Thank you.
it translates. Like this is a fun read. This is
Thank
a fun
you.
read. And there is sort of a sense of delight that you carry, just even meeting you now across the wires, but also I think it translates to your books and your characters. So
Thank you.
yeah, I'm so grateful that you chose to spend this lovely, fun hour with us, freezing in our New England homes.
I mean, twist my arm and make me talk about romance books for an hour. Oh gosh, that's awful.
Terrible. It's a terrible way to spend the night.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to give you one more, do you have any sort of last thoughts you want to leave our readers and our listeners and our lovely bookish people who are here tonight with you? Is there anything else you want?
Well, I think that if romance is a difficult genre to advocate for sometimes, and it has a stigma around it, but it is the most popular book genre, period. More romance books are sold than any other genre combined. So people are out there, and people who are reading romance books like myself are voracious readers, and we read all types of books and all steam levels and all subgenres. So I think a lot of it is about, as I mentioned before, you can take any genre that you read and find a stepping stone into a subgenre of romance to find something you like. But also you can find amazing communities at Reddit or on Instagram or Discord or wherever you're hanging, or your local bookstore, exactly, wherever you're hanging out. And you get to find amazing opportunities to connect with people about books. I have a lot of online friends, and it just so happens that I live a lifestyle that is a digital nomad. So most of my friends are online, who I see regularly. But I always have someone to read a book with if I want. And I always have people that I can say, hey, have you read this book? Because I need someone to talk to about it. Like it's interesting. And the fact that I get to talk to people who are as excited about the genre as I am, and people who are as excited about writing the genre as I am, is a really lucky thing in my life. So, find your community and enjoy it, because man, it's a blast.
I mean, what better way to end than that?
There you go.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank
My
you
pleasure.
to our audience for being here and for supporting independent bookstores like the Silver Unicorn Bookstore in Acton. Come in. We have tons of romance books. We have tons of Liz Alden's books. You can pick them up in the store. You can also pick them up on silverunicornbooks.com. Her books are fun. They are low on angst and high on steam. So it's a perfect winter read.
Absolutely.
Yes. And thank you so much, Liz. We really appreciate you being here and choosing the Silver Unicorn to host you tonight.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And I really appreciate everybody who stuck around with us tonight. This was great.
Thanks, everyone. And say hi to the Bahamas for us, please.
I will do. I'll go have some fun for you.
Please do. Okay. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Erin. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.